Can I add a couple
Sure.
other statistic points or some points of clarification too on this? Is that one thing, the other thing that you have to consider when you're talking about a 19% graduation rate, exactly at 4% from the institution in which you began, is that well, how much longer does it take generally for students to get through a CSU, right? And generally, the median time to degree for a CSU student is 4.7 years, which is not a whole lot better than...
That's not an accurate statistic. We discussed that last year. That's of those who graduate, it's
Yes,
4.7 years. If 90% never graduate, they're not counted. So that's, with all due respect, that's kind of bull.
Well, let me give you some other statistics then. Okay, so if you look at within 5 years, we jump from for the 2008 cohort, we jumped to 42%, and then within that 6-year time frame, we're at 54. And in our graduation initiative, we're shooting for 60%, and we're well on track to beating that as well. So I think we're on the right track, and I don't want it to get lost that with a statistic that is very narrow at 19%, that we're an utter failure. We are actually moving the needle on that significantly, and we're educating students with a quality education when they come out of these institutions. So, just wanted to put that out there as.
And I don't question that. I wouldn't use the 4.7-year statistic ever again because it just really is deceiving at best. But understanding that a number of students graduate in 6 years, that is an important statistic, and I appreciate that. Moving on to UC. The $6 million, I guess it is, requested for additional graduate students.
Correct.
Are those for resident or non-resident students?
So I think possibly what Mr. Constantinos was referencing is that we probably provided some erroneous information to the Department of Finance. It was not our intention at all to limit that to non-resident students. I don't know with certainty what the proportion would be, but my guess would be it'd be reflective of our overall proportion of new students, which would be about half and half resident, non-resident.
Yeah, if you could get us that.
Sure.
Again, when we're making these data requests, the staff is writing them down. I really am serious about these things. If you could get them to us, say by April 1st, take a month or so. But that'd be very helpful.
Sure, I'd absolutely be happy to provide that.
I know, speaking for my colleagues, at least, well, speaking for myself, I can't speak for all of them, but $6 million for more resident graduate students is much more attractive, I would say, to the legislature than $6 million for students who will come to California, do their couple of years here, and then take their expertise back, in many cases, to wherever they came from. So that's important for us to know.
Sure, and I'd be happy to provide some information about how many actually do stay in California afterward. I know with our non-resident undergraduates, we're at about 50% of the domestic non-residents, about a third of the international that remain in California after graduation. So
great, thank you. Last question and comment kind of merged here. I chaired the higher ed committee in the assembly for 3 years, and we had several bills that came to us to limit executive compensation. And I have, in each and every case, opposed limits to executive compensation. I bring this up because obviously that's part of the budget money we're talking about here. I think it's important for universities, CSU, UC, community colleges for that matter, to get the best people they can to do very, very difficult jobs and within reason, not have a limit imposed by the legislature. That said, it's become apparent in the last 24 hours that some of the CEOs of these campuses have more than one job and make a lot of money in other places. Chancellor Katehi is the case in front page of Sacramento Bee today. My guess is there might be others. So that's my other information request to you, is that by April 1st, if possible, could we get a list from both segments of the other jobs that the CSU CEOs and UC CEOs hold, and how much money they're getting paid for these other jobs. So when we look at a budget and say, if a CEO is being paid $400,000 and we decide that's an appropriate amount, that's fine. If in fact they're making $500,000 on the side by sitting on 6 different corporate boards that take them away from their job for 3 months out of the year combined, that's important for the legislature to know. So that's what I'd like to see, if possible, April 1st, for all of your CEOs, how many jobs they have and how much time do they spend on these other jobs when they're supposed to be on the state dime. Okay? Thank you. Other questions or comments? Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kiki and Ryan, I'll ask you probably the same questions, but you're showing 28.7 billion in revenues, but only 7 billion in expenditures. So maybe if I could drill down a little bit, I'm assuming then that the medical centers are break even. You probably spend 8 billion as well as make 8 billion.
I don't know that I would characterize it, Senator, as break even.
Okay, so you make 4 billion?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it that way either. I would just say
7
that
billion?
being a self-sustaining, being a self.
Well, I'm just trying to figure here because, we're talking about, just a small part of the pie. So you've got maybe a high net on the others, but then Ryan, you're showing it, even Steven. So are you showing me all of your activities, or are you just giving me the core like
I'm
Kiki
just giving you the core, both on the revenue and on the expenditure side.
so
We
then
have auxiliaries similar to what UC has in their tables, and then those are self-supported functions, right? They generate their own revenue and they have their own expenditures.
Okay,
But
so then how do we get you two to maybe next year give us comparable reports so we can compare apples to apples?
Certainly, I'd be happy to provide that.
certainly, we'll compare notes.
Okay. Kiki, do you have a 10-year plan, strategic financial plan for the district, for the system?
The university does have long-range financial plans, yes.
Are they published?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Can I have a copy?
Certainly.
Same for you, Ryan? You 10-year plan? You kind of plan out what you're going to spend and receive for the next 10 years to see what you can do?
To some degree, and we could provide you some information.
We're forcing homeowners associations to set aside reserves. It's sort of, kind of a law. If you own a condo or a townhome, or if you're in a community that's an association, you're putting so much aside every year for the roads or for the pool or whatever your amenities you've got. Why aren't you doing that? Why don't you have set aside reserves for whatever building you build? You need a new roof in 30 years, and you need X, a new heating and venting, air conditioner, HVAC. You need that in 10 years. So why are you not systematically setting funds aside for those types of capital expenditures?
So that's part of the reason why, in speaking about the medical center revenues, why I was hesitant to use the term break even. The medical centers do know that they have these future capital costs, sometimes related to, for instance, a state seismic law or some other type of requirement where they have to upgrade facilities. Certainly with areas like deferred maintenance on any of our non-state eligible projects, for instance, they do calculate into their planning the amount of funds that will be needed into the future. With respect to deferred maintenance, it's a little bit tough, but I think the next panel will be very enlightening. That's where we'll have a discussion of our capital infrastructure, and our only project this year is the Merced 2020 project, and they address this very issue of how to sort of, if you will, bake in upfront the costs associated with deferred maintenance or with maintenance and future operation as part of that infrastructure project. So more to come on that point, but I would just say that there is an effort to do what you're referencing.
Okay, because Jason used the word backlogs a few times, and I just thinking, okay, well, you got to get caught up, but then you got to start thinking like you're forcing taxpayers to think, we should be doing the same model, I would think, as we're mandating on homeowners. Jason, has there ever been a bill requiring the set aside of funds like a homeowners association for our college campuses?
I'm not familiar with any legislation. I'd have to go back and check that, but I'm not familiar with any legislation that's required that. I would say part of our recommendation to have a set aside for maintenance would be to allow the segments to have some discretion in holding some of that funding in reserve in certain years so that it's available for future years for maintenance. The idea would be to come up with some annual need and allow the universities to be able to manage that.
Well, we had Superintendent Torlakson earlier and, complaining about 100-year-old buildings, but when I was treasurer of the county and I, worked on these bond measures, and they succeeded for the most part if you had a good case, even in Orange County, even when it was 2/3 before Prop 39. But it was frustrating to say, hey, can't you guys, excuse me, can't you guys start working on a set aside so that the next time you need to rebuild or refurbish, or that you don't have to come to the voters and do a bond measure. You have set the money aside, just like the rest of us are doing in our real life. And so that's just something I would say. It seems like we're always playing catch up, always the guilt trip, always the guilt trip. Our roads are in bad shape. We need to raise taxes now because our roads are so bad now. And I'm saying to myself, where have you been for the last 20 years? Why aren't we setting funds aside like you're supposed to? So I just got on my soapbox. Sorry, Ben.
Now we have the rainy day fund.
Yeah. And I think that's all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morlock. Senator Allen.
This is why it's good that we do long-term financial planning, because these problems are real. I mean, you served in county government, and you know that it's not a guilt trip so much as like real infrastructural needs, but we got to pay for them over time, and we got to do it in a fair and responsible way.
Right, but a good steward plans ahead as opposed to all of a sudden, here's your big bill
Totally.
you do today, and you're going,
Totally, and I commend the governor for thinking in a more of a stewardship way. So, a couple of things. First of all, I want to start by saying I very much support UC's I think very modest proposal that with enrollment growth, of graduate students and in the cap and trade thing, I think is incredibly exciting. There's a lot of really great opportunities that can be there. I was here for, right in his room actually, a presentation from Mark Gold at UCLA talking about the grand challenge at UCLA that they've been doing on climate change and how to adapt to a warming city but also the leadership role that a campus like UCLA can play in the entire LA area to show the way for new ways to address and adapt climate change issues. So thank you to everybody. Let me just ask a couple of questions about CSU. This actually relates to an issue that we're having with a constituent. There's students who could not get classes when there were cuts to class availability, and now they can't get financial aid because there were limits on years of aid, right? So you had kind of 4 years with regards to Cal Grant, and one of the questions is how is there anything to address this? You've got the fact that students are taking 4.7 years to graduate, many of them, many more. It's really hard to get your classes, particularly under the current circumstances. How do we, how do we deal with this kind of scholarship crunch that exists with Cal Grants?
I think it's tied in largely with, the crunch in the budget at the time, right? I mean, you had a situation where, both of our segments were having our appropriations, dropped, and it was no fault of anybody's except for that the economy was in a terrible situation. But there is that, there obviously is that concern. The best thing that I can offer you now is that you have, as a body here, have continually invested in us going forward. And by doing that, and by also investing more with Cal Grants and going along with the way that the Cal Grant program is structured, where if, as an entitlement program, when students are entitled to that program, you are continuing to fund that. So as you're investing in us, we're able to offer more and more opportunities for hiring of lecturers and our tenure track faculty, which allows us to grow our course offerings. And so you're seeing more and more efforts here just at each and every campus. But then you've also seen that at the early stage, right out of the recession, you saw a concerted effort by both of our segments to invest in what was considered the bottleneck problem, right? Because that was one of the original problems there, right? Was that during the recession, courses had to be cut, vacancies had to be not filled, and so you had that particular problem.
Right.
So I think a number of these types of efforts, and also uniquely to CSU, in the I would say mid to late 2000s, what we did was a concerted effort to reduce the number of units that it required in order to graduate. So a whole host of these efforts just prior to and during the recession, I think, and then after the recession have moved the needle, I think. And that's why I think you're seeing in our statistics in terms of graduation, the sheer number as well as the graduation rates going up because we have done a lot of things. Now, it's not going to be perfect across the board, I think. I mean, you're going to have that handful of cohorts of students that got stuck, right? They're going to have gotten stuck in that pickle of having limited course opportunities and also trying to balance that with their financial aid package. And in terms of having a standalone new program in order to address that particular issue, we don't have one of those.
Okay, I'd love to work with you on that. I mean, that seems to be a real weak link in the system, and maybe we can figure out a way to just provide a little bit more protection for students who get stuck. So oftentimes through no fault of their own. Let me ask, so I know you guys are in the midst of a very intense negotiation. You're asking for a significant budget increase. I see that you're budgeting 2% for employee compensation. I mean, to the extent that you feel comfortable, and I understand if you can't talk much about it, but can you kind of talk about the negotiation, some of the disparities that have been pointed out by the bargaining units?
Sure, I can give
as
you
a result to employee compensation.
I could give you a little bit of a recap. So right now, where it stands in the labor negotiation process between the CSU and the California Faculty Association is we're in this stage called the Fact Finders Report phase. And this goes through the process of having first tried to bargain an agreement, going through a process called impasse where one or more parties both say, well, we can't come to an agreement. Mediation is entered, and then what has transpired and what we are awaiting is a fact finder's report and recommendation on a way to bridge the gap between what is a 2% comp pool offer from the CSU side to what amounts to a 6.2% comparable package from the California Faculty Association side. So right now that is in the phase of being drafted. When that is finalized and that draft is shared with both parties, there's a 10-day quiet period where the two parties can review the recommendation of the mediator, can at any time still try to work out an agreement based on those recommendations, and then after that 10-day period, then that report is publicly available. And it's our hope that we can continue to work together on that. But there's a huge gap. I mean, predominantly and fundamentally, one of the reasons why we've offered 2% comp pool, it's tied in very closely with the multi-year funding plan that was instigated by the governor's administration years ago, right? So it's no coincidence that there was a 5-5-4-4 plan when we tried to build a collective bargaining agreement that mirrored that, where it was like 3, then 2-2. The first year was not, there weren't agreements open, but it was there's more money provided in 1 year from the governor and then less the next couple of years. And so we tried strategically to, align it so that the funding would mirror that, because we have all these other, pushes and pulls on us, right? We recently received the new authority and the responsibility to deal with all and every aspect of our facilities. We have to carve out of our operating budget funding to do that. We also have to continue on and understand that this state needs more baccalaureate degrees. And so we have to grow enrollments to some degree as well. And we also have those mandatory costs that come up and can vary widely because we have to cover our healthcare costs. And year over year alone, those costs went up by $20 million just because of the way that things were calculated and done and decided at CalPERS. So we have a big divide. It's a pretty significant amount of money. I would say that there is a $60 million gap between just the CSU offer versus the request of the Faculty Association. And the other thing, to no fault of the California Faculty Association of their own, there's no fault of theirs, but because our collective bargaining agreements with our other units have a lot of Me Too clauses, we have additional pressures of additional $40 million on top of that. So it's really tough. You know, there's no real escape valve in our plan, so to speak, because like has been proposed for a long time, that tuition remained flat year over year. And so that really puts a lot of the burden on the fact of 100% reliance on where the general fund is. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no,
clarify
it does.
things.
I just certainly hope you're able to come to a mutually agreeable solution. I understand you've got major budgetary challenges. I think also the faculty saying with a lot of justification that, it's been a long time since they've gotten properly compensated. And I know this is a challenge that we have all across
And we're
the
trying
system.
through our plan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to what we can afford. We're trying to get out there, but they are just huge amounts of money for compensation, right? It's big, and it's hard to squeeze the water out of the rock in that way.
Well, I guess I just would say, to Maritza, and this is obviously not your fault, but I do continue to believe that even with the increases that we've seen, we're just underfunding public higher education. With all the flaws of Proposition 98 that we discussed in the last panel, at least it's provided a baseline of funding that has allowed for at least a continuance of a percentage of the budget for K through 14. And of course, as we know, since the 70s, I think the percentage that's gone to Cal State and UC has dropped by about half, both in real dollars and also in percentage of the state budget. And it's just appalling. And I think it's such a step back from this, the legacy of investment in public higher education that's paid off so well for California and so many industries that we've seen that have grown here as a result of that investment. So I just ask that the governor not forget about what an important legacy and what an important service these two institutions provide to our young people and to our economy and to our future.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. When I see that the CSU is preparing 1 out of 20 baccalaureate degree holders in the country, that's such an impressive statistic. And the UC, of course, is internationally a destination that everybody wants to go to. So both systems are doing great work within the tremendous limits of the budgetary situation of the state, and we appreciate that. I think I speak for all of us. There will always be places where there can be improvements, and thank you for being open to those. If there are no other questions for this panel, I would thank and dismiss you.
Oh, just one comment, because I do like the slides that Ryan put together on the number of schools and graduates. Since in 2014, I was selected, I might have said this before, but as Alumni of the Year for the Business School at Long Beach State. And when I accepted my award, I said that the number of graduates from Long Beach State, like 260,000, so to be selected was like statistically impossible. But I also mentioned that the governor that signed my diploma would also be signing theirs, which is also statistically impossible.
That's funny.
Thank you, Senator Morlock. Thank you all for being with us, and we'll bring up our last panel. Rada Nassar from the Department of Finance, Jason Constantoros from LAO, Dan Feidelberg from the UC Merced, Vice Chancellor for Planning and Budget for UC Merced, and Elvira San Juan, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Capital Planning, Design, and Construction from the CSU. We'll begin with Ms. Nassar.
Good afternoon. I'm Rada Nassar with the Department of Finance. Today I will provide an overview of the capital outlay process and the current status of the 2016-17 capital outlay budget proposals for both CSU and UC. In 2013 and 2014, statutory authority was granted to UC and CSU respectively to pledge a percentage of their general fund support appropriation, less specified adjustments to fund capital expenditures. These expenditures are limited to academic facilities needed for seismic and life safety needs, enrollment growth, modernization of outdated facilities, and the renewal or expansion of infrastructure to support academic programs. For CSU, capital expenditures also include the cost to design, construct, and equip energy conservation projects. And for CSU, the eligible uses of state funds also include lease payments, availability payments, installment payments, and other similar payments that support capital expenditures. providing the universities with the flexibility to manage their capital programs within the framework established in statute will allow them to undertake priority projects as they deem necessary and affordable and begin reducing the backlog.
Ms.
of-
Nassar?
Yes.
Senator Morlock has a quick question.
Sure.
Just
You started off by saying that funds had to be set aside, which is like the answer to one of my questions. What section were you citing? What bill or what code section?
Yes, so for UC, Chapter 50 Statutes of 2013, it's AB 94, as well as Chapter 34 Statutes of 2014, SB 860 for CSU.
Thank you.
That was a quick answer.
Yeah, I have it right here.
That's good.